if you're new to the Bronx Documentary Center, we're a non-profit educational and gallery space in the South Bronx. We offer an after-school analog photography program, the Bronx Junior Photo League for middle school and high school students residing in the Bronx. Students learn how to shoot and develop their own work, receive college prep and one-on-one counseling. We have various workshops available to all ages and major exhibitions throughout the year, free public programs in conjunction with the exhibitions. So tonight we have Michael McCoy and Idris Idris, sorry. So we're going to present their images commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Executive Order 9981. Yeah, so we're going to hand on the mic.
Hello, all right. Welcome, y'all. Welcome. Thank you for coming through to the Bronx Documentary Center. My name is Idris Solomon. I'm the host and creator of the Black Shutter Podcast. And tonight we have Michael A. McCoy, fresh from the DMV, from Baltimore. And, you know, I recorded a conversation with Mike on the podcast a few years ago. He was, I think, episode 8. Episode 7? All right, my bad. Episode 7. And, but just a little bit of history, right? Back in January 2018, I met Michael McCoy at the New York Times Portfolio Review. And what was interesting about that time is that there were about 6 of us, 6 black photographers that we all kind of met at the same time, and it felt like, you know, when you start high school and you go into the cafeteria and you kind of like chill with the same group of people at the lunch table, and then you go off to class and come back to the lunch table and you like chill with the same people. That's sort of like what we did. We created a cohort, and in between reviews, we would come back to the table and talk about how the reviews went. And then we would talk about where we're from and the work that we were making. And we just kept doing that throughout the whole review. And at the end of the review, all of the photographers who were at this event, we all walked over to a bar. And even inside the bar, the same 6 of us huddled up in a corner and just kept talking. And by the time it was time to leave, we didn't really want to leave, because that was the first time that, you know, for me, I was able to really be in conversation with other black and brown photographers and realize that we all had a lot of similarities. We were going through a lot of the same experiences in the industry. So I said, you know what, let's stay in touch. I created a WhatsApp group for the same 6 photographers, and I named the group Black Shutter, right?
So we started with the text methods first, remember?
Yeah.
And then we went from text
to the WhatsApp group, yeah. And so the group eventually grew. More and more photographers became part of the group, and we were realizing that there was a lot of us having the same kind of experiences. So fast forward, the group evolved into a podcast, and Mike has gone on to become like a Pulitzer Prize nominated photographer. He's like a staple on the Hill in DC, and now we're here at the Documentary Center about to get into conversation again. So Everybody give it up for Michael and McCoy. So, Mike is, you have a body of work, right? A lot of work based on like politics in DC, but you also have a few projects. You have one project called Invisible Wounds, right, which is about veterans who suffer from PTSD. You have another project entitled Training Day, right, which is about the day in the life of a drill sergeant, black drill sergeants. Then you have another project called Honor and Respect, which is about veterans who have lost, their lives, and then like how families are coping with that loss in their life. So what I'm recognizing in those three projects is that they're all based on veterans or people who served in the military. Why is it important for you to document these kinds of stories?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a veteran. I'm a black veteran. And oftentimes, veterans don't get the proper honor. We're glorified when we go to war, but once you come home, it's back to being a regular person. And from someone who wore the boots and uniform, I know how it is. We don't do this for awards and accolades, but why not show love to people who keep us safe? And with me being a black veteran, also know how it feels to have a void. Because no one talks about the black soldiers. And we're going to get to this later, but without black soldiers, like some of the ones that we're going to see here, from units like 6 AAA, Martha Point Marines, 61st Tank Battalion, which was the original Black Panthers, there will be no me and there will be no talk today.
So, when did you eventually pick up your camera?
Funny story. So, growing up in Baltimore, my father had a camera in the car, and I would play around with it from time to time. I didn't know what I was doing. And it was film, so you just couldn't hit the button and delete the picture. And I got older, started meeting girls, put the camera down. But it wasn't until I got to Iraq. And I couldn't see my mother because I was in war. And I would take pictures, put my cell phone out, and this was my little point-and-shoot camera. I would take selfies before selfies were a thing. And my mom would always say, "Why does Santa Claus have a gun in his hand and standing on top of an M1 Abrams tank?" And I was like, "Hey, we good." But then I started taking pictures from my friends so that they could send home. And then I started realizing that pictures build morale. So get back off from Iraq, and we redeployed to the States, and a year later, we go back to Iraq. And on my second tour to Iraq, my mother died. And then I realized you can't catch up on all the parties, birthdays, anniversaries, cookouts, family gatherings. So why not document it? So, one thing led to another, and I'm in.
So, the loss of your mother at the same time that you were starting to understand the power of photography sort of just like magnified the need for you to take photos.
Well, actually, it was the loss of my mother, but then I lost my first cousin, I lost my grandmother, lost another cousin, I lost then my uncle, I lost 5 family members in maybe 18 months. And then I realized I've been gone, but you can't catch up on stuff, so why not take advantage of recording those memories? I was having a conversation with Idris and Mike Santiago and Mike Young, and I went to my cousin's baby shower a few weeks ago, and I didn't pull the camera out, but I pulled the cell phone out, because those memories you just don't get back. And as a black man in America, you might come outside and you might die. if it was your family. Because, you know, you only get one family.
So, you know, I don't know what it's like to be a vet. You know, I don't have any real, you know, like you're one of the only friends I have that actually was like serving, right? And a few years ago, I remember you and I both attended this safety training in DC. I took the train out to DC, and at the time I was doing journalism for Reuters, and this was right about when something was going to happen in politics, and they were sort of like gearing up all of the journalists to be prepared for, you know, civil unrest. And I found out that, you know, you were going to be in the safety training, so I was like, man, I'm going to be there with one of my homies. And I remember there was a certain part of the training where, you know, they're showing videos or they're doing like active, like hostage, you know, training and things like that. And I remember you got up and left. And when you came back, I was like, yo, bro, like, you okay? He was like, nah, I had to leave because I was triggered by something. And that's when I realized that, you know, vets don't, not all vets experience life the same way when they come back. So, can you speak a little bit about what it's like to, you know, live a civilian life when sometimes you have like these moments that come out of nowhere?
It's definitely different. It's an adjustment, and you know, it's something that most people don't understand. They will never understand. Like if you haven't worn a uniform or boots, you know, it's hard to identify. Now you may be able to identify certain aspects, but you know that's something that the average person would never come to grips with. And you know, like for someone like myself, this is the process. I mean, I did 2 tours in Iraq. My last tour in Iraq was in 2007, and every day I still make adjustments. You know, no one day is the same. You know, might have one day, you know, things are good, and then you may have something that triggers you, just like you just said. And you just gotta, you know, take a minute to chill out and go back to, you know, some of the methods you may have learned for therapy to help you get through that.
I remember a few years back, one of my buddies was getting married, right? And so the bachelor party, quote unquote, was we went camping, right? So it was a bunch of dudes who were around a campfire, and it was just like some of us who were in long-term relationships or married already were just giving them drills about like what to expect, you know, going into his marriage. And so it was like a pretty, you know, like an intimate setting. You know, it was definitely dudes just trying to drop knowledge. And one of the dudes gets a phone call during the middle of this thing. We're trying to chop it up with our homie. He gets a phone call and he gets up. He's like, "Excuse me, I gotta go take this." So he goes off a few yards and he's on a call. And then he comes back. He's like, "Yo, I apologize, y'all. You know, I served in the military and that was one of my army buddies." And he said, "We have this thing where if one of us calls and we're by the phone and we're able to see the call, we pick it up because I know that if this dude is reaching out, that he needs to know like somebody else is on the other line." And I always remember that moment because it shows how much support is necessary. That he was just there to, you know, pick up the phone. So when I think about that memory, I think about folks like yourself and you know, the kind of work that you're making. So like, I wonder if you could tell us why you are so committed to making this work. You know, like what do you want people to get out of the work that you're making?
Well, for starters, especially when it comes to, you know, my projects of black veterans, you know, people see that, you know, black veterans are just as equal as white veterans. You know, I can take it back to 2003, 2004 when I first joined the military. You know, when you go to training, you learn everything, but you don't learn anything about the black history of black service members. So if you want to take this back to the Civil War, you know, most people don't know, but the first person that was buried at Arlington Cemetery was a black man. by the name of William H. Chrisman. Now, he didn't die in combat, he died of illness. And at the cemetery was segregated. And where they were segregated was Section 27. So I remember one year, I was at the cemetery for Memorial Day. This is when the former president was in office. And everybody's going to the tomb of the unknown soldier. And this is a cue that I learned from the great Jamel Shabazz. You go left, I go right. I believe Michelle Obama said it too, but everybody goes to the tomb, I go the other way. Now, the walk from the main gate to Section 27 was a hike. So if you wasn't in shape, you weren't getting there, because you couldn't take no Uber, you couldn't take no rented bike or no scooters. So it took me a little while to get there. And as I was going through, I saw a black MP. And I said, hey, Sarge, you know where you're standing? He said, yeah, in the cemetery. I said, no, do you really know where you're standing? In the cemetery. I said, hey, Sarge, I'm going to ask you one more time. Where are you standing? Section 27. I said, you know what Section 27 is? He said, it's a section of the cemetery. I said, no, this is the segregated side of the cemetery where blacks were buried. And he didn't know that. And that's something that you don't learn when you're in. You don't learn about the 6th Triple A. You don't learn about the Triple Net. You don't learn about the 751st Tank Battalion. And you may learn about the Tuskegee Airmen. Just like the Harlem Hellfighters. The Harlem Hellfighters was a unit right out of Harlem. So in World War II. Now, has anyone in here ever heard of the Harlem Hellfighters? But like, that's why I think it's important for people to know the history. Especially if you're a black or brown person and you're thinking about serving, you need to know. Because these things aren't going to be talked about.
So, I understand, like, if you're serving, definitely it's important to understand your history, right? Because it's something that you're actively engaged in, and you're actually creating history when you're doing it, right? But for the average person, you know, it feels like, you know, and you're a black vet, right? So it seems like this work that you're doing, unfortunately, only gets some sort of recognition twice a year, right? It's either Black History Month or around now during around Veterans Day, right? So aside from like why do you think that it's so challenging for this kind of work that you're making to get like broader awareness?
That's kind of a trick question, but I just don't think people understand. But you know, it's up to me. It's just like, you know, when I call Mike Camper and Mike Young and say, hey, I have an idea, and I think it'd be really good to bring awareness. You know, you can't force you to do something. The only thing I can do is, you know, share the knowledge that I have and hope that people listen and have opportunities like this to present the knowledge and hopefully that people do their research and learn and share the message.
So, serving in the military, right, obviously is a great service to your country. And aside from keeping folks safe, there's a lot of, I know that there's a lot of pride that goes into serving, a lot of skills that you learn, it's character building, right? How would you say that your experience in the military influenced you as a photographer?
Well, first and foremost, it taught me discipline. You know, because I have like lots of assignments, especially on the photojournalism side, where you have to practice discipline. You know, for the last couple of weeks, I've been covering this Google versus the U.S. Antitrust trial. And I found myself sitting outside the courthouse from like 7 in the morning to like 5 in the afternoon. And once the attorneys and the witnesses go in the courthouse, you have nothing to do. So, you know, you've got to find ways to keep yourself busy and keep yourself sharp just in case something happens. And, before the military, not to say I was disciplined, but it just made me a little more aware.
So, in this country, race and military have a very interesting relationship, right? You have one side of the coin that feels like black and brown folks shouldn't be enlisting in the army because of operation leadership or whatever, right? Or the fact that black folks who serve come back and not get any respect. How do you navigate, these issues when you're making your images? Like, it seems like you're celebrating these folks that are participating in something that has such a complex history, you know what I mean? Like, so I guess the question is, like, how do you see your work, like, sort of within that structure of, like, race and military?
And this is another page from the Jamel Shabazz playbook. Everything I photograph it with IMD. Right is right, wrong is wrong, black is black, white is white. Now, what you see is what you get. And photographing how I see it.
So, at this point, I want to jump into some images that, I'd like to get a little bit more context about. And, just hear about how you approach making some of these portraits. How do you connect with the vets or the families of the vets that you photograph? So, all right. So, tell us about this image. Who is this woman, and who is the picture that she's holding up?
This is Miss Romae Davis. She's actually the oldest member of the 6th AAA Central Coastal Director Battalion. So 6th AAA was an all-black postal unit assigned to World War II. There was 855 women in this unit. And as of today, there are 5 women left. And the woman who passed away recently, she's actually from the Bronx. And so Romae, she's turned 104 last week. What was that? 104. And I took this picture inside of her home in Montgomery, Alabama. And it was one of the most interesting experiences that I've had. Well, at that time. But then out of the 6 women that were still living, that is 5, I actually had to photograph 3. And had to have lunch with all 3. But hanging with Romae was an awesome experience. But one thing I took from this project and everything I just want to see is I wish I learned about the Romae Davises, the 6 AAAs, the 761st Tank Battalions, the Harlem Hellfighters for the first one. And that's why I think this work is important, so that you can share that message, so that you can educate people who serve and people who do not serve, so that they can know that we made a contribution to this country, especially during World War II.
So what do you think, so when you first enlisted, how do you feel like having that information would have changed who you were as a soldier?
I may have decided to stay in a little longer. I may have chosen a different career path. I may have chosen to, go to warrant officer school, maybe become an officer. Maybe become a pilot. You never know how that can shape you, but if you don't know the information, your decision making is limited. And that's why when I have the opportunity to talk to young soldiers, airmen, Marines, that I always try to let people know about the history of blacks in service. Because it may be your mission to go in for 3 years, get out, go to school, but you may want to make a career out of it. So the thing is, if you want to make a career, be the best. Learn what you can learn. You know, maybe use some of these folks as inspiration. So, this is another picture of Rome Davis. She's sitting next to Colonel Harry Mincer. And I met Colonel Mincer when I went to Montgomery. And Colonel Mincer, I want to say she was the first black squadron commander of Maxwell Air Force Base. And, you know, that's my girl. And she fought hard to get her recognized. And there's a statue of Rosa Parks that Colonel Mincer fought to get up. And like most people don't know, back in the day, it was like Rosa Parks, she worked at Maxwell Air Force Base. So she was living in a segregated Montgomery, but then once she got to that base, it was integrated. But she would go to work, and she would leave back to segregation.
So you traveled to Alabama for this, to make these images. Was this something that was like self-assigned, or like how did you end up finding Rome and you know syncing up with her to make these images?
Well, I mean, the pictures later in the slideshow, I'll probably go back to it, but I learned about 6 AAA through a photo assignment, and then I have a friend of mine who's a retired general, and he connected me with some people, and these people connected me with some people, and I wound up meeting retired Colonel Edna Cummings, and Edna, she's a terrific person. She's a historian. She knows everything about the 6 AAA, and kind of wish she could be here tonight to talk about some of it, but you know, Edna, she kind of made the connections for me to connect with these veterans. And without her, none of this would have been possible.
So it was this was like something that you know, created yourself, this opportunity to go out there?
I did with the assistance of Edna. You know, so like, that's another thing, you know, about these projects, and whether you work with military projects or just projects in the neighborhood, you know, you may have one gift and your gift may be photography, but if you don't have the resources, you know, whether it's money, whether it's connections, you know, none of this could, you know, be possible. So in a situation like this, you know, it's all about teamwork, and you know, it takes a village. And you know, for someone like Edna, even though I was enlisted and I was an officer, but you know, Edna, she believes in this just like I do, and she helped me make it happen. And speaking of Edna, that's Edna.
And how'd you connect with Edna?
So, I did a project on Colin Powell when he passed away. So, I covered his funeral. There was a gentleman at my church. He was a retired one-star general. And I called him one night. And I said, hey, Greg, I want to do something with Colin Powell. And I'm trying to incorporate other black generals. I said, hey, you want to post a picture? And Greg's a photographer, by the way. And he was like, well, I don't want to be in the camp. I said, why? I don't photograph. He said, but I got some other people for you. And, you know, Greg's a wealth of knowledge. So he plugged me in with General Claire Alexander, which you're going to see a photograph of her later in the slideshow. Now, General Claire, she's the oldest living black woman general alive right now. And I went to her house to photograph her for the Colin Powell project, which you guys will see some pictures later. And we were in the backyard, and she had a dove. And I was standing on her deck, and I accidentally broke it. And she said she wasn't mad, but I know she was mad. But she was the one that connected me with Edna. So the day before my assignment, I called General Claire, and it's about maybe 9 o'clock at night. And I said, hey, who's this Edna Cummings person? She said, you don't know Edna? I said, no. And I said, well, can you connect me with her? She said, okay. But the assignment was that next morning at like 10. And like I said, I'm talking to General Claire, not. I'll call her in the morning. She said, no, call her tonight. I said, I don't want to call her tonight because I don't know her. It's kind of late. And she said, what was your rank? I said, I was a specialist. She said, what is my rank? I said, you're a 1-star general. And she said, who I rank to? And I was like, roger that, man. So I called that, and we wound up talking for like maybe 45 minutes that night. And like, we met in person the next day, and like, we've been BFFs ever since.
And who was this gentleman?
This was way before the pandemic. I would always go down to the Vietnam Memorial for Veterans Day. This is before I found out New York City had a parade, because we don't have one in D.C. And another play for the Jamel Shabazz playbook. And I would always ask brothers that were in Vietnam, where were you when MLK was assassinated? And you would be surprised on the response that you get. You know, some guys may have been back in the States, some guys may have been back in Vietnam. And this gentleman here, he was telling me that on their base camp, they took their ammo because the racial tensions were so high. And not sure if anybody's been in combat here, but you know, when you're in your FOB, which is a forward operating base, you don't need ammo, but you never know the enemy may attack. But you gotta protect yourself. So these guys were pretty much armed.
So they took the ammo from the black soldiers.
Black soldiers. The racial tensions were high.
So, and who was this gentleman? He was on the base. He was one of the soldiers whose ammo was taken away. So how do you discover that when you are working with these folks? Like, it sounds, you know, you said that one of the questions that you ask is when MLK was assassinated, right? But what other types of questions do you ask these folks when you first sit down and meet with them? How do you establish a connection?
Honestly, man, it just comes natural. I mean, people see that you're genuine in what you do. And the mere fact of a vet and a combat vet, they feel a little comfortable. Now, sometimes you may not get this initially. It may take a while. I mean, just like when I was doing Invisible Wounds, you know, I was in Martinsburg, West Virginia for 3 months. I went 30 days without taking a picture. And to mention Jamel Shabazz again, I was going to take my camera, and Jamel says, yo, take your camera. And I'm glad I did. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be here today.
So, going through a bunch of your work, I noticed that you focus a lot on like the older veterans. You know, what do you think? You know, how do you feel like their experiences differ from the younger generation of veterans?
Man, they deal way more than what we deal with. I mean, like for instance here, you know, this is Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg. You know, you guys are familiar with Fort Lee in Virginia?
Mm-hmm.
You know, they renamed Fort Lee after Lieutenant General Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams, part of the 6th Triple E. You know, like back in the day, General Gregg could not go to the officers club at Fort Lee. But now, his name is all over that building. Here's a picture of him on one end of the O Club, here's a picture of Charity Adams on the other side. So, you know, those guys had it way rougher than us. You know, we still see it in the military to this day. It may not be as blatant, but it's still there.
So, with the older vets, it's a little bit easier to kind of narrow or pinpoint some historical things that were happening, right? Because it already happened, right? We can go back to the reference points and we can learn that, you know, like because of racial tensions, ammo was taken away, or this general could not walk into certain places, but now his name is on the building. there's new history happening now, right? So like, how do you see this project evolving once, you know, the older generation of vets start to like, you know, move on and pass, and then there's a new generation that their history is still being made.
Well, I mean, if you want to keep this going, we have to have more talks like this. People have to know these stories, you know? Because I'm sure no one here today knew who Lieutenant General Gregg was before I mentioned him. You know, if we want to keep this thing going, you have to continue to talk about it. You have to continue to share the message. You have to be vocal about it. You know, like, his experience here was like amazing. And so, General Claire, if it wasn't people feel like, you know, General Claire, who hooked me up with, you know, Colonel Cummings, you know, we wouldn't be sitting here today talking about this. So, now I knew that the base was being renamed. And I called Edna, and she goes, you know what? Call the godmother, General Claire. So I called General Claire and said, hey man, I know I haven't talked to you in a while. And I apologize for breaking your dub and your debt. I said, but can you hook me up with General Gregg? And she said, okay. And I'm thinking she's going to give me like an email address. Now, by the way, General Claire, she's like 82. She gives me his phone number. So I called him, left him a message. And his brother, he just turned like, I think 97 years old. And he called me back a few days later. And he was like, I don't know you, but if you know Edna, be good with me. I said, all right. And I said, hey sir, I know they're going to rename the base in your name in a few weeks. And I know you're about to go into DOD custody. And it's going to be kind of, you know, tough to get with you. He said, I would love to spend the time with you. And this was like Wednesday, Thursday. And he said, can you come by my house on Saturday? I said, what time? He said, whatever. I said, okay. He said, come by at 10. Now, General Gregg was maybe 45 minutes away from me. And I get there. And I get there at 9:45. Sit in the car on my phone. And I get off. And I go to knock on the door. And I noticed the door was open. This guy's waiting on me. He was like, what took you so long? I was like, my bad, sir. And, you know, I pulled the camera out, and he had on slacks, and had a blazer on. And he had a nice little casual shirt. He was like, man, I need to go throw a towel today. And I was like, nah, sir, we good. And he went back in his room, we changed, we came back out. And I only took a handful of pictures, but it was all about the experience. I might have spent like 2 hours with General Gregg, but we talked like an hour and a half. And, you know, he just told me about his experience. And, you know, Lieutenant General Gregg, he was the first black logistics 3-star of the Army. That's pretty high. So logistics, they cover everything from supply to the fuelers, because there are fuel trucks, the cooks, mortuary affairs. You know, he was that dude.
And again, this was something that was self-assigned. Yeah. So
It was self-assigned, and I went to like various outlets and agencies. And you know, the thing is, you know, when these things happen, no one tracks it because, you know, I want to say there were like maybe 9 or 10 bases that are being named. And Fort Lee, and I want to see the Fort Polk was renamed after a black person. It was like no one had any interest. And New York Times did something similar, but one of the bases. But you know, my thing was, I'm like, yo, I got access to this guy that was basically being renamed after. And normally, what is the base, post office, the street, whenever something's being renamed, a person's no longer here. And this guy, 96 years old, he lives by himself, still drives himself around, and I have access to this brother. Like, no one was interested.
So that goes to the challenges of being a black vet and covering this type of work, right? Like, I can imagine that for you, these stories are so important, right? They're so important. It's important for history, right? American history, not just black history, right? So I can understand the frustrations of seeing these stories that are so important that people need to know about, but you're up against like a media industry that doesn't seem to care about this type of work only unless it benefits them, right? So I feel your struggle in that, you know. But it is great work that you're doing to go on your own time, spend your own dime to go meet with these folks. I understand this is Eugene Bishop.
Yeah.
Right? I did read this article about him in the Post. But what was interesting about this article was that it didn't focus, I forget, he turned 100, right? This was the story?
Yep. He's 101 now.
101. So, as I'm reading through this article, I don't see anything about his experience as a black man, as a black soldier. And it was just written about the fact that he turned 100. So I wanted to ask you, how did you feel knowing the history of Eugene Bishop and the type of work that you do? Like, what did you feel when you read the article yourself?
Spot with that one. Well, first of all, Eugene lived a few blocks away from me. And normally when I get assignments, and I live right outside of DC. So when I get assignments, I have to drive my maybe 20, 30 minutes to the city. And then once I put the address, I was like, oh shit, this guy lives right in the corner from me. So it was like 5 minutes. But when I got there, you know, Eugene is an example of someone that's forgotten about.
That's what?
That's forgotten about. And, you know, we often don't talk about the contributions that we made as Black Americans and minority Americans in World War II. And it was an honor to just spend a day with him and celebrate it for his 100th birthday. And I asked him, I said, hey, what kept you so long? He said, faith in God.
So there's a missing piece to how you make work, right? Because it's like for the years that I've known you and I've been following your work and I've been seeing your posts, like I can scroll through my feed and automatically know when it's a Michael McCoy photo, right? There's certain color that happens, there's certain expression in people's faces, there's always pride. There's always pride, right? So for me, that missing link is the conversations that you have, the questions that you have with these folks before you photograph them. You mentioned earlier that, you know, one question you asked is where were you when MLK was assassinated? And for this gentleman who turned 100, one of the first questions you asked him was, what kept you here so long? So you are doing something very interesting in the way that you establish a connection with these folks that's not just limited to the shared experiences of being veterans. Knowing that, like, how do people respond to you when you photograph them? Like, are they excited to be photographed? Are they like nervous? Are they reserved? Like, what is your experience?
It depends. Most people, especially veterans, we're not used to being photographed. Like, does anyone in the room have any family members that are veterans?
Yeah.
You see those pictures
Deceased.
of your uncle, your grandma, your granddaddy, or whatever, that's hanging in the living room in their uniform, their church uniform? You know what those pictures are? Those are your death pictures. So if something would ever happen to you, that's the picture that they would use. So when it comes to being photographed, we're not used to that. Like when I was in Martinsville, West Virginia, those guys were not used to having that photograph taken. Hell, I wasn't. And that's why I took my time to get to know people before I pulled the camera. But then once I did, it blew out. Man, I'm about to go to America next time out. Updating their Twitter profiles, Tinder profiles, black people meet, seniors meet, but it's just different. And then you have some people that are used to the camera. But, you know, whether someone is used to the camera or not, it's all about who you are as a person. Because I can walk outside this building right now and ask 50 people to take a photograph. The average person might get 49 no's, I might get 48. And I can make 2. And those 2 that you make is because you have a genuine connection. Granted, you may not know that person, but a person can tell if you're genuine.
So that's an interesting point. And I feel like photography is just an extension of the photographer's personality, right? If you're able to make a genuine connection with someone on a human-to-human level, then you will be able to get that genuineness in the image that you make of them. But not everybody is able to connect as quickly, to like walk outside and connect with somebody like on the spot. And it doesn't mean that that person is not genuine, it just is something about personalities that doesn't always transfer into the images that we're able to make.
And not to go off topic, but when you look at incidents like George Floyd, you know, George Floyd protests were taking place all over the country. Freddie Gray protests were happening all over the country. And we call people parachute journalists. When Freddie Gray happened, I grew up about 7 blocks when Freddie was killed. And you have photographers from all over the country coming in. And those guys weren't from the area. They drop in, come, they go. And a lot of those guys weren't walking through the neighborhood because they had no connection. You could have been a black dude, but if you weren't genuine, you bring your ass out of there. And I'll never forget, the next morning after some of the fires, I was on Pennsylvania Avenue, right by the CVS, and I forgot what store there now, but back then there was a KFC, and my mom would always stop there and get chicken on the way home after she got the train. And I wanted to get to Fulton Avenue, and you can only walk on North Avenue because everything was blocked off, so I wound up going to Cumberland and go to the Avenue. But there were journalists that were getting run away because they weren't genuine. And if you don't have any honor and dignity in yourself, you can't make photographs that show honor and dignity. You can't. And that's why everybody can't do this. And just because you go to J school for 4 years doesn't make you a journalist, doesn't make you a storyteller. You know, when I look at guys like myself, Devin Allen, Janelle Shabazz, Idris, you know, they didn't go to J school. These good people. Either send you or it's not.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that the camera is just an extension of who we are as people, right? And we can use that to show other sides of ourselves. We can take a portrait of somebody, and that portrait of somebody else is actually a self-portrait of ourselves, because we see something in that person that represents something inside of us, right? So I feel like in most of your images, I see a part of you. I see something that you want reflected out to the world, and I see that come alive in the people that you photograph. So I wonder if you can talk about a little bit about this photo, who this woman is.
This is one of my favorites. This is like one of my heroes. This is Major Fannie McClarendon. Major McClarendon, she just turned 103. Now, she lives in Arizona. I was supposed to go photograph her, and then something came up, and I wasn't able to make it to photograph her. And I said, hey, hey, I'll come back out in a few weeks, and I'm calling check in, and kind of find out she was in a car accident. At 103, she was still driving. And she gets into a car accident. I got the video on my phone, and I said, whose fault was it? She said, the cop said it was my fault, but it wasn't. And I was like, I believe you. No, but like, she's sharp as a tack. But once she got to the accident, they wanted to keep her in the hospital. She got up, she tried to leave, and they kept her there for a few days for observation. But then, while she was in the hospital / rehab, she contracted COVID at 103. Now, I've never had COVID. Well, I haven't been diagnosed with COVID. But at 103, she probably beat COVID faster than anybody that's in this room. Faster than anybody in this room. So, I get the call and said, hey, she's back home, she's doing good. And they said, when do you want to come out? I said, tomorrow. I literally packed a bag and went to Arizona like that next day. Well, 2 days later.
From Baltimore?
From DC. And, I went out, hung out with her, and Mason McClarendon, she runs like an arts and craft, like collectible store. We wouldn't go there, but we wound up going to lunch instead. So we hung at the house for a while, and then we went out to lunch, and she had a margarita. Sangria. And I had a margarita. Yeah, normally at work I don't drink. I said, ma'am, I said, with all due respect, I can't say that I've had a drink with a woman from the 688. I said, do you not have a drink? She was like, drink up, baby. But then she kept making comments on my sneakers. She was like, I want those shoes. And I was like, okay, at 103. But that was a true honor. And to piggyback off what I said earlier, if I'd have known about Major McClarendon back in the day, things would have been different.
So, I have to go back and ask, like, you flew out to Arizona on a whim. You went to, you traveled around making these images. Like, how do you foresee these images living in the future?
Well, I would love to see them hanging in places like African American Museum, the MoMA, any historical society that wants to house these. But if not, they can live online, they can live through these talks, and they just need to be reshared.
So, doing a podcast, creating episodes, putting them out to the world, never know really who's listening or what people are experiencing when they do hear an episode. I imagine it's the same thing when we put photos out. We don't know who sees them or what they're, how they experience the photos. But like, how do you want this? Like, if somebody was to see your body of work on the table or on the gallery and you're not there to talk about it, what do you want them to walk away with from it? Like, what do you want people to do when they see these images?
I just want them to take it in. I want them to learn, share, create. Keep that torch going. Now that's General Claire. So she is the mecca of the Black Officers Club. Like I said before, she is the oldest living Black female general. And the picture she's holding here is a picture of Colin Powell. So she used to work with Colin Powell back in the day. And this is right after Colin Powell passed away. And she couldn't say anything but good stuff about the brother. I wish I had a chance to meet him, never did. And he was another reason why I served. Because you don't really see, black four-star generals like that. When I was there may have been 4 or 5 4-star generals in the entire army. And when you come to general officers, flag officers, well, that's what they call admirals, flag officers. And people who look like us, you don't really see many of them.
And what was the first thing you asked this woman when you sat down and made this image?
I just want her to be herself. So, walking around the house, and I saw the picture on the wall and I said, hey, do you mind if I take this off? Because I want to show the connection that you have with, Cole and Powell. I said, do what you do.
I noticed that in many of your photos, you photograph people holding photos of either themselves, a young version of themselves, or someone else. Why is that a strategy that you have? Is that something that you ask them to do, or is that something that they do naturally?
I like to ask people. I like to make a connection. It makes you think about the past, whether it's good, whether it's bad, Another one. Now, this is Paris Davis. As you guys can see the shirt, he was a black special forces officer. He served in Vietnam. And Paris served in Vietnam and for about 30 to 40 years. They were trying to get him the Medal of Honor. And his paperwork would get lost. And I shot this story during the pandemic at the house. And I had a few talks with Paris, really good talks. And Paris was an officer. If anybody knows anything about special forces, the teams are small. And he was the leader of his team. So everyone that worked underneath him were enlisted. They were white. And, they had their challenges, the trials, the tribulations. But, you guys can read about Paris. Paris did a lot of heroic stuff. And he was overlooked for the medal. And he was recently awarded the medal by President Biden after 40 years.
Was that when you made this image, after you received the medal?
No, this is way before the medal. This is 2 years before the medal.
So, these images were a little bit out of order, but you sent me an image, I think earlier today or yesterday, that you found of your grandfather, right? So, after you sent that image of your grandfather, I looked over in my crib and I found this image of my father, right? So I sneaked this one in to the conversation. Now the reason why I added this image is because I never met my father, and I only received this image about 4 years ago. So this is the first time I've ever saw a picture of my father, right? And so I'm 44 now. So for 40 years or so, I had no idea who my father was or what he looked like. And I remember you just mentioned that these were like the only times that black folks would get a professional photo of themselves. It's their death photo, right? And fortunately, my father didn't die in the army, but this is the cleanest picture that anybody in his family has of him. So I sneak this photo in here because, it's interesting that for a lot of black folks, these photos are the only time that they presented in a clean way. So Yeah, that's right. I brought that in. And this is the image that inspired me to shoot that photo. And so, what happened when you found this image of your grandfather? I remember you said there was a story behind it.
So this is my grandfather. He served in World War II. My cousin graduated from nursing school this past Mother's Day. And my family did live in Philly, so I go to the graduation. And wanted to go back to my aunt's house. We had a long night. Normally when I go hang with the family, I love to spend as much time with them as I could, but I was like, yo, this is one of those situations where I need to be back in DC because like stuff is popping off. And we hung out, great night. And for some reason, we just stayed up all night, we just talked and talked and talked. And get back to my aunt's house pretty late, and I go to sleep. I wake up in the morning, but then TV downstairs in the living room was acting kind of crazy. So cause my aunt, she liked the news too. That's probably why we get along so good. And she was, you know the president's coming to Philly today? And I was like, I don't care, I'm not working. And I'm in the bedroom, and you ever go into your bed and you see like your little nightstand with the mirror? And there was an obituary for my mother, my grandmother, my uncle, and my cousin. And I realized that I lost some obituaries, like in transit. And I said, oh, I need these obituaries. She said, okay. And she said, well, your uncle and your cousins, I have it here in the bedroom. She said, go back to the bedroom where you were staying. There's one for your grandma. Then when I went back, my grandma, she was a deaconess, so I found one of her old church cassette tapes. I already sent the young folks in here, so they don't know about cassette tapes. But then she said, well, your mom's obituary is downstairs. So we went upstairs, go in the cabinet, and found a picture of my grandfather. And I decided to call Edna, Colonel Cummings. Sent her the picture. And I said, hey, can you help me find something out about it? And she was like, well, if I had some information, I could. So I gave her everything I had. And then I called my little sister. And she was able to find some stuff. And she found me a service number. So Anna did her research. And then, as usual, she goes above and beyond. And then she finds an old newspaper clip from the Afro newspaper. Not sure if you guys have the Afro newspaper up here, but Afro newspaper was a black newspaper that was very prominent back in the day. And what the Afro would do, they would embed soldiers into World War II. And during those times, black soldiers were either maids, butlers, servants, did all of the mediocre tasks. And this was my grandfather may have seen a little bit of combat, which was rare for people coming up there.
So does the fact that he served combat, like does it make a difference if someone is enlisted and they serve combat versus not serving combat? Like, does that weigh differently on like their service, in the military?
It depends on who you ask. I mean, service is service. I mean, everybody has a mission. I mean, your mission may require to, go to combat, your mission may not. But it doesn't make you any less patriotic.
Indeed. So, I think before we go into Q&A, I just have, I guess one more question. And, you are dedicated to this cause that is bigger than yourself. You're a vet, you're a black vet, so you know that for all the folks serving, they're missing out on a lot of events happening back home. They're missing out on birthdays, they're missing out on weddings and engagements and all of these things happening. You understand the importance of making images that document life and history, right? So you're committed to doing something that, like telling these stories that are meaningful and have impact. What is a piece of advice you have for young photographers who are trying to make meaningful, impactful stories themselves?
Keep shooting, keep recording. You know, whether you have a mirrorless camera, DSLR, film camera, cell phone, track phone, Obama phone, like use that thing everywhere you go. I may not have a physical camera, but I have this. Record those moments. You know, because what you're gonna record today, you can't watch tomorrow. You know? Like, I would have loved to have met my grandfather. I never did. But if it wasn't for photographs, I would never know how he looks. So, in the words of the great Marty Williams, photographs are important. I'm sure some of you guys, they probably follow Marty, but that's his slogan, photographs are important. Because without photographs, like they said on social media, it never happened. So, and outside of students, for all of y'all in here, and for everybody watching, take that picture.
All right, thank you, Mike. I appreciate your time and your vulnerability.
Two others served in the Army. They tried to get me to go into the military, but I did not end up going that route. Is there any? I've also been like interested in like covering work like this, but they're not particularly open to getting a photograph taken. Is there any other work like this that you're like aspire to work on, given your background? Like any other like photo assignments or even like video work? Since we live in this era where video is like so important right now, and anything like that.
I'm inspired to do work that my heart calls me to. And you know, like right now my passion is veterans work. It may not be the cool work that everyone thinks is cool, but for me, this is what my heart is. Like these stories need to be told, and especially this population here. Like most folks in World War II, like 95, 96 years old, if they're still living. Like last week, I photographed a 92-year-old veteran and two 100-year-old veterans. Like, these stories need to be told.
Are there any plans to photograph any veterans your age who served in Afghanistan? Because a lot of the veterans are older veterans who obviously need to be documented because, you know, they're at the age where they're pretty much, you know, I'm going to transition you. But, you know, like, are you planning on photographing veterans your age who served in the same wars that you did?
I've started that. I really haven't photographed them much lately. You know, my main focus has been, you know, World War II, some Korean War from the fine, Vietnam War. Those guys getting older. And, you know, these wars were 50, 60 years ago, and they need to photograph. And it would have been nice for them to photograph back then. But since they haven't, and I'm around, I try to photograph them as much as I can.
I mean, that makes sense to the urgency. You know?
Because, you know, tomorrow's not promised.
Anyone else in the audience have a question? All right, so I think that concludes our live podcast.
I got one more question.
I don't have a question. I just have more of a statement. First, I just want to ask everybody to put their hands together my statement is that, and I don't want to get emotional, but I want to thank you for your service. I don't know if that had already been said, but I want to thank you for your service because I want to thank you for the service and for the stress that you undergone being in the military, not just with where you were stationed, but also with the experiences the obvious things that you experienced. And I want to thank you for your service, for acknowledging and bringing to light these stories that need to be told, because if it wasn't for you having this passion, this desire, and also the connection through being a service member, being a veteran, then none of this would have ever happened. The connections. And it's like, I'm thinking too about like your interactions with Joe Rodriguez, your interaction with Jamal Sabaz, and how they've supported you, but also the passion and the desire that you had to connect all the dots and to be able to bring these things to light. And one of the things that you guys pointed out too, in terms of where will this work live? I'm hoping it gets to the Smithsonian. I'm hoping it gets into places where these stories need to be shared. But even if they live online, even if it never gets that far, which I think it will, the stories have been told. The pictures have been taken, and I can tell you, I've been inspired, and I'm hoping that those of us in here who are documentarians and photographers and storytellers have been inspired by what this, because this brother goes out and does this out of his own pocket. You know what I'm saying? And some of us are always looking for finances to try to get stories told. But this brother is so passionate about the work that he's doing and the stories that need to be told. That's what drives him. So I just want to put my hands together and thank you for the work. It's very important work. And continue to press on, brother.
And this wouldn't be possible without Mike too. So, Mike, you work hand over foot, late days, early mornings, making this happen. So, I gotta take my hat off to Mike.
I got one more question. When did you find the picture of your grandfather?
I got this picture this past Mother's Day. Well, the day after Mother's Day.
So did that kind of like rejuvenate this project for you? The fact that you were able to find this photo of your grandfather and find out more about him, that kind of put more of a sort of sense of urgency and to continue this?
Nah, I mean, by then all the work was done. It just added more. I mean, it just gave me more sense in my purpose. Like, I didn't know my grandfather served in World War II when I went to Iraq. You know, if I'd known that back then, it may have changed my trajectory with the military, but I didn't. But I'm glad that I do know now. So. But it's definitely making me push forward. You know, because just like, I may meet another World War II veteran that may have served with my grandfather. That would be nice.
I'm sure those stories are out there for you to continue to uncover, man. So, I mean, I think Michael Young, you broke it down very, very, it's hard to follow, you know, how you broke it down. So, thank you for that summary. And you know, I echo what you were saying. Thank you for your service, Mike, both in the military and photographically. The work you're doing is inspiring for a lot of young people who want to use their camera to make an impact. So continue going, brother, and you know, you have people out there that are rooting for you, that support you. So appreciate that.
I have one quick question, which is, when you're doing, do you go ahead and research grants to help you with this project? One, and also if you have met with people, like what was their response to you proposing doing that? As well as publishing, like book publishing.
You know, when I meet with people to explain this project, everybody loves it. I mean, like no one wants to say, hey, you know, we don't really care what the best, but as far as it goes, there's always conversation. So hopefully, you know, more opportunities will come by.
Because I think it's a great concept and idea, and I don't understand why major organizations wouldn't fund it. It's because black veterans, I don't know. But what I'm just trying to mention is it is great. It is something that needs to be known, and I think the United States needs to know that. My grandfather was in World War I, right? I didn't know any soldiers, black soldiers, were a part of World War I until I really realized that he was in it. And my brother and I used to go we would go over to my grandparents' house, and he had his sword, and we were taking and hitting it against the concrete, trying to figure out what's going on, and not realizing that was a sword that was from World War I. But aside from that, it's just the fact that I think you deserve a grant for that, to travel around the country and document people who are moving on. It's very important.
Thank you for that. And definitely hope that, there's money out there to be funding your project, that it reaches your pockets as soon as possible, bro. All right? So, thank you all.
Thank you also too, brother, because one of the things that you said that struck me in terms of the podcast, that keep pushing forward. You don't know who's listening and who's being inspired.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely.